see you before, but that's okay. I'm glad you're here. We want to try to educate as many people as we can. And my name is Dr. Rob Lindsay, and obviously we're going to be talking about healing a broken heart. And I think that, I hope that what I talk about and teach tonight is going to be new for you. I think that it's going to be information that if you've heard it, then you're on the cutting edge of what healthy heart is about, and frankly about what a diseased heart is about. And I hope that by the end of tonight you're going to find out that what you've been learning, what you've been taught, if you have a heart issue or if you know somebody who does have a heart issue of some kind, the way that it is being managed these days, it's not the whole picture. You're not getting to the root cause here. So we're going to dive in, and really for the next 2 to 3 hours, we're just going to, no, I'm just kidding. I would drive myself nuts talking for that long.
Might be a monologue.
But, yes, yeah, everybody would be snoring. So anyway, thank you again for coming. So let's get started here. So just a little bit about myself. I have a master's degree in sports medicine, and the only reason I really share that is because I've been on both sides of the healthcare spectrum. So I come from you might call it an allopathic background. I worked with orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, athletic trainers. I worked in physical therapy clinics, and I worked a lot with athletes. But when you work in the PT clinic, you basically work with all ages, and of course with sports medicine doctors. So I have that perspective, and then I've been a doctor of chiropractic for a little over 10 years now. And so that is on the complete opposite spectrum of most medical doctors these days. Now, I'll say that there are a fair number of medical doctors who are becoming more natural-minded, okay? I'm having a hard time finding people that I can really send patients to, but we're finding people that are at least dabbling a little bit more in natural healthcare, so we're working on that. I've been studying over the last several years functional endocrinology and what we call functional medicine, and that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. And just really quick, what does functional mean? It means function. It means looking at, well, how does this body work? And instead of the traditional healthcare paradigm, which says, okay, you have a symptom, you go to the doctor, that symptom typically gets maybe some lab work, maybe some cursory, very surfacey lab work done, which frankly is based on what insurance companies will pay for. And then that symptom and that little bit of lab work gets paired up with a diagnosis. Now, a diagnosis, frankly, doesn't do us a whole lot of good. It really is a Latin word or two. And tendinitis, what does that mean? Inflammation of a tendon. Well, that doesn't really tell us much. It doesn't help us very much. Okay, high blood pressure is not a diagnosis. It is, but all it is saying is that you've got high blood pressure. It does nothing to tell you why you have high blood pressure. But then that issue, that health challenge, gets paired up with a drug that's in a huge book about this thick that somebody decided would work for that condition. That's traditional healthcare. Okay, functional medicine, functional endocrinology, functional neurology says, gosh, you know, there's probably something driving this. There's probably some cause. There's probably some root to this. And unless and until we find that root, we're just going to be banging our head against the wall. And frankly, you could do the same thing naturally as you do medically. In other words, I could throw supplements at a condition until the cows come home. But if that doesn't get to the underlying cause, then we're in the same spot, except that instead maybe we haven't injured the liver as much. You know, I mean, it's really not that much of a difference. So the other thing that I like to just highlight a little bit is that I do consult with a group of doctors that are functional medicine doctors around the country via a message board and seminars around the country. And I like to talk about that because literally there are combined knowledge for some of these doctors. You know, we're looking at hundreds of years worth of knowledge. Some of these people, 30, 40 years doing functional medicine when it wasn't even a word. And so when I end up with a challenging patient or a case I don't understand, I can go to these guys and I can get help just like that. So I kind of feel like I have a group of doctors around the country that we help each other. So I love that. So tonight what we're going to talk about though are these are the main topics here. One, the cholesterol farce. Okay, if you don't already know, cholesterol is not the issue. Okay, we'll talk about that. The real problem behind cardiovascular disease. We'll talk about what's driving it. What is the underlying piece there? The three possible responses that can occur, that do occur when blood vessels are damaged. There's only three, one of three. Or you could have multiple, but there's really only three things you got to know. What new lab tests are available that we use in functional medicine to try to identify these problems? And we're going to look at just a brief kind of it's a real case using kind of a fictitious person, but it's something that we actually see in the office. And then some of the main things that you want to remember after tonight. Okay. I'm going to ask you if you would just hold your questions. Okay, hold them till the end. If you think of something, write it down, because I do have a lot to cover and I want to honor your time. And then at the end, you know, if there's I have a few minutes, we can answer some questions. Okay, but otherwise, typically people will just come in and we'll answer their questions. Okay. So let's talk about what cardiovascular disease is not. Okay. Number one, it is not blocked arteries from excess cholesterol, that is plaques because of a poor diet. Now, has anybody been told that before? Okay. I think most people probably have, right? You go into the doctor and you have high cholesterol, and so you're told, we gotta get you on this drug to lower that cholesterol level, okay? Why? It's high, and it's your diet that's causing it, okay? We'll go into this a little further. It is not, elevated serum cholesterol or blood cholesterol is not a cause of heart attacks and strokes. Okay, if you've been told that, you've been told wrong. It's a lie. Eating foods high in cholesterol is not a cause of elevated blood cholesterol. If you've been told don't eat eggs or other things like that, that's a lie. High cholesterol and saturated fatty foods actually keep serum cholesterol down. Okay, so remember when we were told, oh, you better not eat eggs. Don't eat egg yolks. And that's the cholesterol in those is going to drive your blood cholesterol levels to the moon. No data. So you better just cut down on eating meat because of the saturated fatty acids. Instead, what should you eat? Polyunsaturated fatty acids. We should really eat a lot of those. And so then the question is, you know, half the world has been told you can't eat this food or it's going to cause your cholesterol to go to the roof. So where does that all come from? Well, there's a little bit of history behind that. Okay, so I just like to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about the history. And a big piece of it is money, frankly. It really is when it comes down to money. So the almighty dollar does go first in many cases. So what happened was, back in the 60s, cholesterol was largely ignored until it got to be over levels of about 300. And even then, most MDs were kind of like, no big deal. Okay? So, but then something happened. A company by the name of Archer Daniels Midland. Now, have you heard of them before? All I know is that whenever I listen to PBS, which isn't very often, but if I turn on PBS, Minnesota Public Radio, they're always a sponsor for whatever reason. Anyway, so they have this soybean oil, and they just decided, gosh, we want to sell this soybean oil. We got a lot of it. Let's sell it. So they led this charge saying that that we've got to cut down on cholesterol and saturated fats because soybean oil is unsaturated. It's polyunsaturated, and this is going to be really healthy for you. Okay. So for a while there, actually coconut oil, which is one of the healthiest oils on the planet, and palm oil, they were actually banned from importation in the U.S. because they led the charge. They talked to lawmakers, they talked to all kinds of people and said, we can't have this stuff is unhealthy for you. And then they said, well gosh, margarine, which is basically soybean oil, is going to save our nation, okay, from the dreaded cholesterol. So that's kind of a little bit of history of it. And really, frankly, it was billions and billions of dollars worth of just propaganda over several years, up until, gosh, it's still happening, frankly. This myth is still going on. But they were able to sway the minds of millions of Americans. And at that time, though, even the medical and the pharmaceutical companies, they kind of ignored it. It wasn't a big deal. But then what happened? They found some statin drugs. Statin drugs were invented, okay? So Lipitor, Crestor, and some of these other ones. And they found, through testing this, that this actually had an effect on cholesterol levels. So a bunch of new drugs were created, and cholesterol was kind of made out to be this demon, made out to be this really bad guy that we've got to lower this at any cost. So can the drugs lower the cholesterol level? Absolutely, they can. At what cost? That's the problem. So this war against cholesterol has been really going on for, gosh, well over 25 years, but even for more than the last 5 years, maybe 6, 7 years, we've known from the research and from the literature that cholesterol is not and never has been a primary risk factor for cardiovascular disease. Now I'll tell you something, this is really interesting. A few weeks ago, I had a new patient come into my office, and she came in for her exam. We did some blood work. She came in for the second visit, a report of findings, and she brought her husband. And frankly, she was a mess to be, I hate to say it that way, but she had a lot of metabolic issues going on, okay? She has diabetes. She had extremely high, her lipids were off the charts. She has an autoimmune thyroid attack. She was really in tough shape. So as I sat and I laid out this whole, everything in front of her, all the information we had gathered, her husband looks at me and he says, well, you know, if the worst thing on here is the cholesterol. And I'm like, no, it's not. I said, it's not even close. I'm not even concerned about cholesterol. Cholesterol is going to come around when we fix the other stuff. And he said, well, I was just at, he kind of got in my face, actually. I'm just this mild-mannered chiropractor. I mean, so but he says, I was just at Mayo, and he said, I have the top endocrinologist at Mayo on my side. And he told me that if it was up to him, he would have cholesterol levels at 0. And I looked at him and I said, okay. I said, do you realize that cholesterol is the backbone for your sex hormones? Do you realize that cholesterol is the backbone for vitamin D? Do you think that you can make cortisol, which is your main fight or flight hormone, if you don't have cholesterol? Do you think, I listed off all this stuff, and all he could say was, but my MD said this. And I said, okay, obviously I'm not going to be able to help you guys. And they left. But this is what we're dealing with. These are the upper echelon. Now, hear my heart here. I'm not some great thing. I think we do a pretty darn good job because we dig and we find the cause. But if that's healthcare, I don't want to be a part of that, because that is not helping people. That is hurting people. This man who will go to his grave because his MD said that Lipitor is going to help, is going to save him, he's probably what's going to send him to his grave, frankly. And I can't change that. But if we get a few open-minded people like we have here tonight, maybe we can change that, you guys. So what about some of the dangers of these drugs? Well, liver damage. Why? Well, do you know how cholesterol works, or how Lipitor and other statins work? Okay, so what happens is that there's an enzyme in your liver. Okay, an enzyme is something that breaks down something into something else. So when your body makes cholesterol, and by the way, it's made in the liver. Okay, we make LDL cholesterol. It's necessary for life. But what happens is that this enzyme the drug blocks the enzyme so that you can't make LDL cholesterol. Well, what do you think is going to happen over time? Your number is going to come down. The number in your blood levels is going to come down because you can't make it. So, frankly, all that they are looking for is the blood lab number. But if you have a heart attack with a LDL level of 150, are you better off? Wouldn't it make sense to find out what's driving the heart issue and not why the LDL cholesterol is so high there, and trying to lower that? That's what makes sense to me. With that, you need a liver check every 6 months. Why? Because they want to make sure that your liver is not being damaged. The truth is your liver produces 2,000 milligrams of cholesterol every day, so you shut that off, that's a pretty big amount. Statins interfere with normal liver metabolism. As I said, they inhibit liver production of substances for health. They damage the liver. Musculoskeletal pain. This is something that people hear about. Have you ever heard about that? Where the muscles start to waste away. Okay. It literally causes muscle tissue death. Also, not only does your kidneys have to process the drug, but your liver, but your kidneys have to process that drug as well. So it starts to overload those kidneys, and the kidneys start to fail over time. You can't function without kidneys that are working good. So these are just some of the dangers of statins. Oh, on top of that, the unnecessary surgeries, because people go in, they say, "Doc, I've got this pain in my muscles, I can't figure it out." So what they do is they feel around, they do a couple tests, and it looks like tendinitis or a rotator cuff. You know how many people, I don't have a number for you, but I can tell you there are thousands of people in our country who have unnecessary rotator cuff surgeries because they are having side effects from Lipitor and other statin drugs that mimic a rotator cuff tear. That's horrible. They come out of the surgery and they're no better off. They still have chronic muscle pain. So if you are still convinced that cholesterol is a bad thing, let's talk a little bit more. People with low serum cholesterol, less than 180, have 3 times the incidence of strokes as the general population. Do you know that in the most healthy populations that they've studied, some of these kind of indigenous populations where all they do is eat food that's grown and they catch wild game and whatnot, that their cholesterol levels are well over 300? Yeah. And guess what? They don't die of heart disease, they don't die of cancer, they don't die of diabetes. People with low cholesterol, lower than 200, suffer nearly 40% of all heart attacks. This comes from a medical doctor from the Framingham Heart Study, which was one of the biggest longitudinal studies in the history of America. They looked at thousands and thousands of people over a period of time. From the Journal of the American Medical Association, the more saturated fat you eat, the less likely you are to suffer a stroke. Where do you get saturated fat? Animal proteins. Animal proteins, okay? They found that polyunsaturated fats, the ones that they tell us are so good for us, have no protective effect. But the risk of stroke increases by 15% for every 3% increase in saturated fat. So do you think it'd be a good idea to eat some meat? Okay, absolutely. So if they're telling you, don't eat that, bad idea. You would die without cholesterol. Why? We talked a little bit about this. Your brain is made of cholesterol. 5% of the dry weight of your brain is actually cholesterol. You need it because it makes up your nerves. It makes up the covering of your nerves. You use cholesterol to make all of your sex hormones, okay? Your testosterone, your estrogens, your progesterone, your cortisol. So I won't ask you to raise your hands, but any men that might have trouble with libido, trouble with maintaining morning erection, which is something that should happen, that's testosterone in many cases. What affects testosterone? Number 1 is blood sugar regulation, and number 2, if you're taking a statin drug and you're cutting off your cholesterol, you're not making enough cholesterol, you're going to have a hard time making sex hormones. What about women? Dryness during sex. Okay, these are very common things we hear. They're maybe a little embarrassing. They're common, and those things can be related to this right here, cholesterol. Without cholesterol to help digestion, you couldn't absorb any of your fat-soluble vitamins like D. You know, vitamin D now, we don't even call it a vitamin anymore, it's a hormone. It is necessary for a proper immune function. It's part of every single one of the protocols I use when people have autoimmune disease. It is that critical. You can't make it without cholesterol. Every cell in your body has a membrane that's made of cholesterol, at least in part. That membrane is what keeps all the cell structures inside the cell, and so if that cell structure is broken down, because you don't make enough cholesterol, the cell's going to die. So, if that's all true, then what is cardiovascular disease really about? This is the part that I'm guessing most of you haven't heard before. Excuse me. It is about disorders in the lining of the vessels. Okay? So I have a picture here, and this is a nice, healthy blood vessel. And what you can see, or maybe you can't see very well, but there is a little layer, a single cell thick, called endothelium. You're going to hear me use that word a lot. And then underneath that is some smooth muscle. And that smooth muscle is what allows you to increase and decrease your blood pressure, frankly. Okay, so your vessels are lined with a type of tissue called endothelium. A single layer of cells that act as a wall with thousands of little gates, okay, called receptors. And these receptors allow certain chemicals in to affect the smooth muscle layer below it, right? So, again, your blood vessels can dilate or they can constrict. And that's a function of, or that's what blood vessels do, that's a function of the smooth muscles. The way it's able to do that, in part, is by these little gates, okay? A gate that opens and closes to allow certain chemicals in. But what can happen is you can get damage in this endothelial lining. Remember, it's only one cell thick. If damaged, or those gates don't close and they get stuck open, now you start to have a problem. Because inflammation starts to occur. Okay, we all heard of inflammation. Inflammation, you sprain your ankle, it's red, it's hot, it's swollen, okay? It's kind of similar to that in that it gets swollen, irritated in the actual cells and in the layers of that cardiovascular vessel. And inflammation can cause a blister, okay? It's like a little damaged tissue under that little single cell lining. And it can occlude the vessel and block the blood flow, okay? Now, what the body does when you start to have a little damage, a blister, or think of it like a little tiny cut, what happens if you cut your finger and you start to bleed? What happens? It clots, right?
Yeah.
It clots.
Blood clots, like it starts to grow back together.
Okay. If I put a Band-Aid on it, does that heal the cut? No. Okay, your body has this innate ability to do that, right? Okay. So if you cut your finger and it clots, a similar thing is happening in that blood vessel wall. But guess what is one of the main clotting factors for the blood vessel?
Cholesterol.
Cholesterol. You said laminin, that's great. Cholesterol as well. So the body very wisely says, there's a cut. We got to heal this cut. It mobilizes cholesterol, okay? Now, one of the things that mobilizes cholesterol is called cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone that comes from your adrenal glands. Little glands that sit on top of your kidneys, okay? Cortisol is your main fight or flight hormone, okay? So when we have periods of stress, the body will mobilize cortisol. Cortisol does a whole bunch of things to the body. Like one thing it does is it shunts all of the blood away from your digestive organs into the muscles. Because if I'm about to get in a fight in an alley, do I need to digest my food? No, I need to be able to stand my ground and fight or run away, right? So I need blood to go to the muscles. Now, it also will increase blood pressure. Does that seem wise in that moment? Okay. Does it seem wise to increase your heart rate? Increase your breathing rate? Yep. And it mobilizes cholesterol so that if you do survive the attack, now you can actually clot that wound, okay? So, but if you've got this little blister and the body sends cholesterol there smartly, but now it puts a little bit of a scar over there, just like you might get a scar on your finger. Well, that scar kind of maybe makes a little bit of a lump there, right? A little bit of a ridge. But we've never done anything to take away the underlying cause, so now you might have more bleeding, more cholesterol, bigger bump, the vessel gets occluded, okay? That's one thing that can happen. So, Again, cholesterol is used by your body as a Band-Aid, all right, over these inflammatory blisters. Initially, researchers thought the patch was a clump of excess fat, but again, this is far from the truth. But, of course, tongue-in-cheek, since our friendly pharmaceutical company has a drug that can readily lower cholesterol, why let a silly thing like the truth be told? Let's just make everyone, including your doctor, believe that the problem is cholesterol. Like I said earlier, the top endocrinologist at the Mayo Clinic is still believing this. I'm sorry, I'm a little blunt here, but pick up the latest journal and read it, okay? This is in literature. This isn't me making it up. Okay, a little bit of anatomy. Are you all with me so far?
Yeah.
Am I making sense? Am I going too fast? Okay. Excuse me. Under the endothelium is a smooth muscle, which we pointed out, and responsible for contracting so that it'll raise the blood pressure, right, in times of needed blood flow, or it'll restrict, or it'll relax so your blood pressure will go down. And again, here's another picture. You've got this little tiny 1 cell thick, and you've got this thicker layer of smooth muscle. So the endothelial lining really is the key to cardiovascular disease, right? It's the barrier, it's the wall that allows changes in muscle tone as well as invasions into the delicate space underneath. So I've only talked about one thing so far, which is inflammation, okay? So here's the thing for you all to remember. I don't want a connection. So, okay. And you can bank on this, all cardiovascular disease starts with endothelial disease. You don't have a cholesterol problem. You don't have a low cholesterol or low HDL problem or a high LDL problem. You don't even have a high triglycerides problem, although those all play a part. You have endothelial disease. This is the crux of the whole thing. If you get nothing else, that's the answer right there, okay? Endothelial disease. So again, these cells are it's like a fence with hundreds of these gates. They're called receptors. So these gates are open with specific keys. Now the key, there's only going to be certain keys that are going to open a certain lock, right? So these are different chemicals that actually change the function or change the shape of the fence. Normally these chemicals from the brain and other organs, they're knocking on the gate and they're asking for permission to come in, all right? Can I come in? The body's asking for some help here. Let's give it some help. But as I said, when you're in a fight or flight response and you have the sympathetic nervous system response, that's when everything goes into high gear, okay? Your eyes dilate. Why? Because you want to let as much light in as possible to find an escape route. Makes sense, right? When you're in a fight or flight situation, does it make sense to have more oxygen or less oxygen? More oxygen. So how do you do that? You breathe more. Can I make myself breathe faster in the right way? If I just go, I'm going to hyperventilate, right? The body normally, naturally, innately will increase your breathing rate to allow enough oxygen to get to the system, to get to the tissues, to drive muscle energy, to drive brain function, and so on. Okay, so that's just one thing. So as I said before, you release adrenaline and cortisol, enters the gate in that fence in the endothelial lining, causes the smooth muscle to contract so that you can increase the speed of blood flow, blood pressure, so you can run away. This is normal, as we said, but sometimes these gates, they get stuck in the on position. They don't close. And it happens due to some kind of a chronic inflammatory condition. So what are some of the possible insults of the breach of these gates? Well, these are some of the typical things that we see in the office. It can come from chemical toxicities. What does that look like? That could be mercury amalgams. Okay? If you've got amalgams in your teeth, mercury can drive that. That's heavy metal toxicity, but other chemicals. There is a condition now called multiple chemical sensitivity that's out there. And there are people that have come in to the office and they literally, new carpet will send their brain into a fog that is the chemicals from the new carpet. And they'll list goes on and on and on. I had a lady come to me, I couldn't believe it. She came in and she had, it was 5 pages, computer paper, computer written words, 5 pages long, one after another, of chemicals that she was having allergies to. I mean, where do you go? I mean, how do you even start with that? It was mind-boggling. Food additives and flavorings, those can breach those gates. Other infections, we're going to talk more about that. And then endotoxins, which come from things like bacteria, from yeasts and fungi, molds. We actually find those in a lot of people. We find parasites in people. We find them in people who've gone to out of the country a lot on mission trips. We find that a lot. So it breaks the gates and cause damage to the endothelial layer and or the muscles and tissue underneath. So the worst culprit for endothelial damage is actually infection. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more now. And what happens is people get these what we call subclinical. Subclinical means you don't have any symptoms. You have no idea. It's silent and it festers potentially for years before you have any sort of symptom. And it's the #1 bad guy that causes this endothelial dysfunction, okay? So you don't know you have it, and it causes this damage over the years until eventually you might have a sudden cardiac event, heart attack. And they look at your labs and they go, but everything was normal. Did you ever bother to check for H. pylori, which is a really nasty bacteria? Find it in people all the time, okay? H. pylori is a bacteria that can be transmitted very easily from person to person. It lives in the gut most often. It's been implicated as the #1 cause of gastric ulcers in the stomach. It's implicated in over 50% of stomach cancers. And some of the most recent research is saying that H. pylori is one of the common drivers of cardiovascular disease. It used to be that we thought it was just in the digestive system. Now we see it. It travels around and burrows underneath that little endothelial layer in the cells, hides out, and your immune system can't get to it. So again, endothelial damage is always the start of cardiovascular disease and is usually never addressed by the cardiologist. Cardiologists are the top of their game, and cardiologists are fantastic if you need life-saving care right then and there. But when it comes to looking at this, we're just not seeing them looking deep to find out the underlying root to it, okay? I'm sure there are some, but I'm not seeing it. Meds can lower blood pressure, decrease plaque, or decrease cholesterol, but do nothing to treat the cause of the endothelial disease, okay? I think you're getting the picture now. So what are the only 3 possible responses, okay, when this tissue is damaged? #1, it's a local inflammatory response. We kind of talked a little bit about that. #2, it's an oxidative stress response. What does that mean? All right, so have you all heard of antioxidants? All right. Have you ever heard of the term oxidation? All right. Oxidation is this. If you leave an apple out that you took a bite out of, it's oxygen, it's exposed to oxygen, it's going to turn it brown, okay? That's the process of oxidation. Oxidation also occurs in your body. Oxidation, in simple terms, is when an oxygen atom that, anybody remember chemistry at all? Oxygen is stable when it has 8 pairs. Okay, 8 paired electrons, okay? Now what can happen though is that due to a variety of things, which we'll talk a little bit about, an oxygen atom will actually give off an electron. That's called a free radical, right? We've heard of free radicals. That is it's radical because it causes damage in the body. Because now what you have is an oxygen atom that only has 7 electrons, not 8. And it's unstable. And they call that a free radical, and they call that something that causes oxidative damage. So antioxidants, things like vitamin E, vitamin A, other types of things, are actually what help to give that oxygen back an atom to make it stable. Okay, that's why antioxidants are so good. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you have a lot of what we call reactive oxygen species in the body, they're going to cause stress in that endothelial tissue, and it's going to lead to further problems. And the third is an actual autoimmune reaction. Now, autoimmunity in the United States is through the roof. It used to be that there were only a few named autoimmune diseases. We knew that multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune attack, right, where the immune system is attacking the covering of the nerves and brain. Rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune attack where the joints are being attacked. But almost any disease now, chronic health challenge that we see come into our office, it's based in immune problems. It's autoimmune, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, diabetes. Diabetes used to think, we were told, it's just a blood sugar control issue, right? You just need to change your diet, or else you need to take insulin or metformin or something. Well, guess what? We're now finding that it's an autoimmune attack in many cases of the pancreas. We'll talk more about this. So don't be confused by the names. All three include inflammation, which is the more damaging aspect of each response. So let's look at what a normal tissue response should be. Okay, so you need to understand that, like all tissues, blood vessels are normally in this kind of fine, this flux back and forth of a balance between being injured and being repaired. Because we all have different types of oxidative stress, right? We're all exposed to toxins from time to time. We can't get rid of everything. But damaged by endless assaults and then healed by a collection of innate physiologic responses, okay, over time we call that health, and that's what's supposed to happen. That's normal. However, if you have continual or prolonged damage, the repair can actually start other problems. So it actually starts as a normal process. It starts by trying to repair that tissue, and then it gets stuck in the on position. And I don't have time to go through the whole immune response with you. It's a huge lecture. But let me just say this, and I'm just looking at time here. Okay. We normally have two sides to our immune system, and there should be in balance. Think of it as cops, right, and the SWAT team. The cops, that's called a Th1 response. And the way that works is, when you have a foreign invader, or let's say a virus or a bacteria, or something that your body doesn't agree with, you're going to mount a Th1 response. The cops are called to the scene. Now, what's the job of the cops, the police? It's to take care of the intruder as best they can. Stop that burglary or whatever it is from going on. Th1 is like that. These are called T cells, all right? It's part of your immune system. Now, sometimes the cops have to call in backup, right? And the backup is the Th2 response, the SWAT team. The SWAT team is where we make antibodies. You've heard of antibodies. And the way antibodies work is, antibodies I kind of think of them as kind of like, you know when a criminal gets released from jail, and they might put one of those little ankle bracelets on them that can track them, so they always know where they are? An antibody is kind of like that. It will mark something as a foreign invader, and after the immune system has taken care of it and everything's calmed down, the antibody will circulate through the bloodstream, so that the next time that same invader comes in the body, the immune system recognizes it immediately. You just bypass the Th1 response, go right to Th2, and usually you and I don't even notice it happened, okay? That's why you can be exposed to the same virus 2 years in a row and not even notice it the second year, okay? Does that make sense? A little bit. Okay. Now, in autoimmunity, what happens is one side gets jacked up, elevated, stimulated, and it never comes back to balance. A person can be Th1 dominant, or they can be Th2 dominant. And basically what that means is that when you're dominant in one side, if you continue to do things, eat things, breathe things, rub things on your skin, think things that cause that to be stimulated, it's going to make it even more out of balance, okay? And that can fuel things like an autoimmune attack on the thyroid, which is the #1 condition I see in my office. It's called Hashimoto's disease, okay? Just a little side note, the #1 cause of Hashimoto's disease in our country is gluten, okay? All right, so that is just a kind of a little primer about how the immune system works. With acute local inflammation as being one of the 3 things that can happen, there's hundreds of possible causes. An example, you can have a vascular injury to the blood vessel from high homocysteine levels. Has anybody ever heard of homocysteine? Okay. Homocysteine is a test that I run on every patient that I run blood work on. Why? Because I want to find out if you've got inflammation in your cardiovascular system. Homocysteine is actually part of a normal conversion of making protein. When you make protein in your body, there's several chemical reactions that have to occur. And one of the intermediate reactions is the production of homocysteine. But what's supposed to happen is that the homocysteine should keep going to break down the protein. But in some folks, they lack the right enzymes, the right nutrients, and so it never goes through to completion, so the homocysteine stays high. And guess what? If it's going through the cardiovascular system, it's kind of like if you took a steel ball and you put spikes coming out from every direction, and these spikes are razor sharp, and you put that in your bloodstream and let it go, as it's going through and the walls are going, it's just scraping the walls. What happens when you scrape the walls? It bleeds.
You get a blister.
You get a blister.
And it causes homocysteine and then it catches the plaque.
Got it. Perfect. Inflammation, plaque, cholesterol mobilized. Okay, you guys are great. I already talked about that. So, the second thing we talked of the 3 causes, reaction to oxidative stress. So, I already answered these. I already said this as well. Increased production of reactive oxygen species, that's the unstable oxygen atom, and reactive nitrogen species. Well, this is really important because the nitric oxide system is a whole other system in our body that most people don't know about, but when it's down-regulated and it's not working the way it's supposed to, it's another process of causing inflammation in the body. And I use a product all the time with people called nitric balance. Elaine's smiling because she's had some. This stuff is awesome to help bring this part of the system back into balance and reduce inflammation in the body and calm down the immune response. So epithelial nitric oxide is extremely protective to the cell. Decreased production of it will ramp up inflammation underneath the cell layer. So the third reason, autoimmune endothelial disease. The most common response and therefore the most common cause of all heart problems. I'll say that again. The most common cause of all heart problems is an autoimmune reaction. Your tissue is attacking itself. Your immune system is attacking itself. Autoimmune disease is a normal reaction of your immune system to a foreign invader that it either cannot kill or it's not killable. What does that mean? Well, a heavy metal is not killable because it's not alive, okay? So if you've got heavy metals in your body, then you can't kill it. So your immune system is going to get fired up, and if it can't kill it, you're going to be in trouble, right? So you have to find other ways to get that chemical out of there. Normally the immune system turns on to an enemy attack and kills it, but if the initial immune response is not sufficient to kill the antigen, it will gradually increase intensity and invite in the SWAT team, right? We talked about that. But what if this immune response erroneously turns on against something it shouldn't have? Again, your own tissues. Heavy metal toxicity, environmental poisons, biotoxins. Okay, these are your living organisms, and I mentioned H. pylori. But these are some of the other things that could be driving this. Can you see how complex it can kind of be to try to find out, what's driving this? If you've had any history of viral issues, and you think that it's gone, it might be, but it might still be there. It might still be underlying that. Staph infections or strep infections are common. These little critters burrow into the endothelial cells and create an immune response, but they can hide from the immune system there. Okay? So you got to find other ways to get at those. Now, in the case of H. pylori, the medical response is to give a triple antibiotic and Prilosec. That's kind of the common pattern. We can do the same thing with some powerful broad-spectrum herbs without the side effects, without killing your gut good bacteria. Okay? So over time, the ramped-up immune response does two things. It destroys the endothelial tissue due to collateral damage in its attempt to kill that foreign thing, and it starts to mistake self-tissue for the enemy and begins direct destruction. And a continual low-grade immune response is seen is very inflammatory and vasoconstrictive, so increased blood pressure. Okay? So a lot of times we find an increase in blood pressure goes hand in hand with the increased cholesterol on the lab work. So what's going to happen there? They're going to give you Lipitor and a high blood pressure medicine. What was that? Plavix? So let's just talk just for a moment about this, okay? So John, 54 years old, he goes to see the MD. The MD finds his cholesterol level at 203, okay? So that's high, right? We gotta lower that. So what does he do? He leaves the office that day. Oh, he's got slightly elevated blood pressure as well. So he leaves with Lipitor for the cholesterol, and he's given a small dose because your blood pressure's not that high, so we'll just give you a little bit to bring it down. So, and he's told that it was necessary to keep him from an early myocardial event like that experienced by his father. Okay? So, you know, let's just ask some basic questions here. Okay, basic questions that I like to ask. Was the cause ever addressed here? Okay, I mean, was it even thought about? No. And what I hear from people over and over and over, and please hear my heart, I'm not bashing, this is just the way it is. You've got 5 minutes to go in there with your symptoms and your little bit of lab work, and you walk out with a prescription. 5 to 10 minutes. I don't know how you could find the cause in that amount of time. Everything taught up to this point is not alternative medicine. It's all in the literature. So why didn't anyone dig deep? And why are they not looking at this stuff? It's there. And it's not in alternative literature. It's in mainstream literature. She's saying this. Number 3, if cause is just going to be ignored, is John ever really going to get better? Okay. So if there's anybody in this room who is dealing with some of the same issues, or you know somebody, I imagine some people are here because they know somebody concerned about this, a friend or loved one or a family member, frankly, what chance do they have? I'm just being serious here. There's no chance here for them to truly get better. People die every single day with low cholesterol due to their statin drug. So what would we do differently? Well, 1, just like we're doing here tonight, we would explain the need to find the cause. Don't stop digging. Never stop digging until you find out what's driving it. We would do a thorough examination, including a neurologic exam. Why? Because the brain controls the heart, and if there is a brain-based challenge, in other words, what I mean by that, if the brain is not firing to all parts the way it's supposed to, that can influence your heart. Matter of fact, the upper thoracic spine, I'm a chiropractor, right? The upper thoracic spine, those nerves that come out of there, they go to the heart and lungs. There's a nerve that comes out of the very upper part of the neck, the brainstem, called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve controls heart, lungs, liver, diaphragm, large intestine. You could have a massive even a small subluxation, which is a nerve interference at the top of the neck that can be interfering with heart. So why would I just run a lab work when it could be related to a nerve issue too? So that's what we do. We do a series of functional labs. We look at things like oxidized LDL, homocysteine, high sensitivity C-reactive protein. C-reactive protein is another marker for cardiovascular inflammation. I'm not going to name all these, but these are just some of the labs. Okay, if you've been to the MD and you have a heart issue, and you're reading through some of these, my guess is, or my bet is, that you've had total cholesterol, HDL, LDL, triglycerides. Maybe you had fibrinogen run, but I can almost guarantee that the rest of these on here have not been run. I just don't see it when the lab report comes in. How are you going to know if you don't do the digging? So, let's summarize here. Number one, never take medication based on lab work that doesn't identify the cause. Not a good idea. Number two, there are many more specific labs that can be done that point to one of the three causes of endothelial dysfunction. Right? We said it again. We said it was oxidative stress, it was inflammation, and local tissue inflammation, and it was autoimmune. Which is what that says right there. You need to identify that in order to treat it properly. One of the above three reactions in the endothelium will most likely be the cause of the increased cholesterol in order to heal the damaged arteries. So, fix the endothelial problem first. Cholesterol levels are going to come back to normal without Lipitor. But really, that's not what I care about. I don't really care about cholesterol levels that much. I care about your health, right? I care about healing of that tissue. Success in treating vascular disease is not defined as artificially manipulating lab values with medication. Millions die every year with normal blood pressure, normal LDL, normal cholesterol, because drugs have lulled them, okay, into a false sense of security. If you do not dig to find the cause, you are a walking time bomb. The secret to healing is this: identify which one of the three responses it is, and dig into the source of the inflammation. That's how you're going to get well. Remember, high blood pressure or blocked arteries are not a diagnosis, they are an outcome. Simply evidence of something that's not been working for a while. Find the cause, keep looking until it's found. There's no magic potion or simple cure, so please don't be fooled, even by vitamin peddlers, okay? Look, I have a lot of supplements, we have a lot of different vitamins and minerals and things that affect different pathways, and every single day I have somebody come to my office and they say, "Doc, have you tried this one? Maybe should I take this one for my whatever?" Okay. My friend had this, and I have this, and so they took this L-arginine, and they felt like $1 million. So I decided to take it. What do you think? What do you think my answer is? Well,
I don't know.
I don't know. Exactly. I don't know. It might help you. It might cause your immune system to go into a huge problem. Okay? I've seen that happen as well. So, to wrap it up here, I think I stayed within the allotted time, which is going to be a first, I think. Look, you're all here. Many of you already come to the office. I don't really know why you're here, frankly. Some of you are brand new. I mean, some people are truly information junkies, okay, and that's fine, that's fantastic. But the thing is that knowledge and information is good, right? And you can go lots of places and get it. I mean, you can go on the internet and get tons of stuff. But wisdom is different. Wisdom is taking the knowledge and information, actually applying it. It's the application of knowledge, okay? So, people that come here, we have this all the time, and I use the same spiel, and people still leave and they go and they do their thing, and that's fine and dandy. I have no attachment to what people do. But if you came here just for information and you're actually having a challenge, a heart problem or whatever kind of a health challenge it is, then you're missing the boat. You really are. Okay, if it's just information only, then I just challenge you to take it the next step. Okay, apply it. Or take action. Take action. You know, if it's you, guess what? You can set up an appointment tonight. Normally, to set up a consultation and an exam, the first visit is $200. The second visit is 45 minutes long and it's $150. But we're going to do it all at my expense. Okay? So 2 visits, free, no strings attached. help you. Now, obviously, if there's blood work that needs to be ordered, that's not going to be, you know, free. But to sit down and consult with me, do the neuro exam, and then to sit down in the second visit and do a complete report of findings, no charge for that. Okay. If you choose to do that, I just ask that you have all your paperwork filled out before you come in. Just a couple of rules that we have. Number 2, that you actually bring with you a t-shirt and shorts for the exam so that I can do everything I need to do. All right. When you come in, you'll set another appointment, as I said, where I will do a report of findings with you and your spouse. Your spouse will have to come to the report of findings. Why? Do we need to explain? It's really important for whoever's going to be supporting you through your health to understand what's happening. Okay? So, ready to change your life? Well, if you are, I think I can help you. I really do. And if I can't, I'll tell you. All right? I'll tell you. So, appreciate you coming tonight, everybody. And if you do have a couple of questions, I can stick around for a few minutes. And then, just like you, I have to get home to my family, too.